and get started. Looks like folks are still catching up. We are recording today's meeting. Good morning and good afternoon for those of you on the East Coast. Thank you so much for joining us today. And welcome to the second installment of our Infinite Insight series. Today's discussion is really around how data can help inform and drive our actions in the coming fall and beyond. My name is Andrea Gromberg. I lead the marketing and communications function here at Hunuit and will be your host for today's event. We are so grateful to dive into today's topic. Really important discussion with a fantastic panel. We are also grateful for all of you joining us. We know any year this is a really stressful time in planning and working through those last minute preparations for the new school year. And I think that's exponentially more so this year. We're really confident that you're going to leave today with some really practical ideas on how to use data in this really challenging, changing landscape we are presented in right now. And really hopefully bring back some good ideas for your districts to use in the next steps of your planning. So before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping items. We are in webinar mode today, but we really encourage you to ask questions. This is really going to be a discussion. We're not going to go through a lot of slides today. And we encourage you to ask those right in the Zoom tool. So we'll be monitoring these questions throughout the presentation today and incorporating them into the discussion where we can. And we'll also try to leave some time at the end of the session to address any Q&A from the audience. All right, so let's dive in. I want to introduce you to our two moderators today. We have Sarah Singer, who's our head of customer success. She just gave a little wave. So Sarah brings a really unique blend of consulting and education experience to Hunuit. She has worked with dozens of education organizations across the country, from state departments of education to large metro systems to some suburban and even small rural districts. She's also spent several years at Portland Public Schools leading system planning, research, and evaluation. She joined Hunuit late last year and has really developed a dedicated team here at Hunuit of data advisors that are really eager to help Hunuit community members move initiatives forward. So welcome, Sarah. And then we also have Dr. Courtney Stevens, our VP of Education Research. Dr. Stevens has a very rich history of education experience, starting in the classroom, has led departments throughout the building level, including principal, and most recently served as Director of Accountability, Innovation, and Education Technology at Washington Elementary School. That's right outside of Phoenix, Arizona. Where she actually implemented and led the usage of the Hunuit tool. So Dr. Courtney Stevens joined us about 2 years ago to lead our education research function. So she really takes all of that great practical education experience and continues to improve our platform. So if you've joined the Hunuit community over the last 2 years, or if you've added capabilities to your solution, Courtney has certainly had a hand in helping training and building culture in your systems. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to actually pass the presentation over to Sarah Singer, and she's going to introduce today's panelists.
All right, well, hello all. First off, thanks for joining us. Super excited to introduce to you our panelists today. First off, we have Joel Rabin, and he is a former administrator. He was most recently at Natomas USD, which is outside of Sacramento, California. He is now consulting with school districts to help them build out their data strategies through his organization called Inform to Inspire. So that's panelist one. Then we have Jennifer Price. She is an assessment and accountability leader at the Keller Independent School District, which is outside of Dallas, Texas. She has worked and continues to work towards transforming Keller's accountability system framework into one that's more kind of focused on student growth. And then we have Heather Richter. She's with the Kern County Superintendent of Schools. So that the Kern County Superintendent, the Kern County serves over 47 districts via the Learning Network. And she's focused on continuous improvement processes in the development, implementation, and monitoring of local control and accountability plans. in order to improve student outcomes. So those are our three panelists. First off, thank you so much for volunteering to be on a panel. It's not an easy thing to do. I feel I'm very excited because I think we're going to learn a lot from our three panelists today. And with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Joel, then Jennifer, and then Heather to just give any additional context about their backgrounds that I might have left off, including if you had additional tidbits that you wanted to add about your background, perhaps a little bit more information about your organization, just so that we're grounded in the context of which you present, and a little bit, any more detail you want to add about your current role. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Joel, then Jennifer, then Heather.
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Sarah. So I've spent about 20 years in K-12 research and data, worked in Elk Grove Unified and Fresno Unified, which are both very large districts, 75,000 students or more. And more recently was in a medium-sized district of 15,000. I've been through multiple student information system changes, which is probably one of the most challenging data projects to do in a school district. Led a successful one in Natomas, and then also about 6 years ago brought the Who Knew It platform, the data warehouse, to Natomas, where it's a very powerful and useful tool running the day-to-day operations of the district. And then about a year ago, I left to start my own business called Inform to Inspire, and I work with schools and school districts all over the nation, actually, helping them use data to tell their story, really trying to take data and turn them into reports and infographics that tell a better story. So I'm pleased to be here today.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Price. I am the Director of Assessment, Accountability, and School Improvement. Keller ISD, we are a suburb of Dallas, Fort Worth in Texas. Our district serves 36,000 students and we have 43 campuses. One of the main focus areas that my department helps guide principals, teachers, students is student growth. So that is a big focus for Keller. Everything that we do revolves around how we are growing students and not letting them go backwards. And so that is how we really use the Who Knew It platform. We're in our second year. We've really done some amazing things with the Who Knew It data that we get and helping to develop programs to support students who are going backwards or when we are seeing that equity issue. I also oversee all of the campus improvement planning and the district improvement planning. So Who Knew It has been an amazing tool for our campus leaders to really hone in on the data and how we can use that to drive our campuses forward. So I'm excited to be here.
My turn. My name is Heather Richter. I am the administrator currently of continuous improvement here at Kern County Superintendent of Schools. A little bit of background. I think this is my 27th year. That makes me kind of old. Primarily a teacher. That's who I am at heart. That's who I identify with. But from there, I went to the dark side and became an administrator. I have been a vice principal, a principal, and a director of special education before I joined our county office of education. So my current role really is around continuous improvement. Any school district or schools within our county that have been identified as having concerns with student outcomes comes to my department. And so we have developed a continuous improvement process through utilizing Harvard's PELP and a lot of continuous improvement skills and tools to help schools really reflect. And as you know, if you've been part of continuous improvement, it really is about foundations in data and really understanding our current reality and where our kids are. And so this tool has been, and we hope to really dive into that to be able to support our districts with that. I think we're in a unique situation where our 47 superintendents have all agreed in our entire county to be part of Who Knew It and this data sharing. And so they're able to now share information cross districts. So when kids move from one district to the other, they're able to share CUME folders and information and intervention groups that have been happening with kids. So we're really on the brink in California of being able to share data and dive deeply into where the kids are in Kern to move forward.
Great, thank you all for providing that context. For the next part of the agenda, what we asked is for Joel to help us kind of set the stage. We're in an interesting moment in K-12 education, and so we asked him to share his thoughts about the current situation and the importance of data in driving good decision making during this context.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Hello, everybody. I'm very pleased to be able to set the stage for today's conversation. As Sarah said, it's a pretty unique time for K-12 education as well as the whole world. I'm not going to focus on the obvious changes that you're going through, but I do want to talk about what's different now for all of us in K-12 data and how we can use data and the work we do to support educators differently. So as the picture shows here, someone's trying to hit a target. What we use data for primarily is to measure student performance and progress. Accountability is whether or not the person hits the target. But we also help people, our educator colleagues, by working with students and getting them data that will help them teach their students better. And sometimes we help them find different approaches to teach and work and support their students. A lot has changed for our schools and a lot has changed for our teachers, but what hasn't changed, even in the strange world we're living in, is the need for data. And what hasn't changed for our teachers is that they're still going to be focused on helping students learn and grow and become college and career ready. On the next slide, what you'll see is a cartoon that's meant to be a little lighthearted, but it depicts the strange year we're all living. It's meant to illustrate the challenges that our teachers are experiencing. You'll notice she no longer has a bow and arrow, just like our teachers no longer have their normal teaching practices. Our teachers are being asked to teach on computers away from their students in a turbulent economic and social environment with little training for how to use these new tools. And we don't know what still might happen during the rest of this year. And by the way, they're still trying to hit that same target with all of this happening around them. So as data leaders, we need to measure things differently. We need to support teachers and other educators, but we need to be looking at using data in different ways. And we probably need to shift our focus this year away from performance data. One way we can do that is by helping our colleagues with process data. So if you're already doing that, that's great. But if you're not, one thing that you can do is you can use student enrollment data, student attendance data, and other data to help your colleagues make other kinds of decisions. Decisions like how to schedule students, how to plan for the future, how to staff schools, and even how to purchase PPE or technology. On the next slide, what I've done is list a few ways that we might consider our work to be different this year. As I was preparing for the presentation, I was thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And if you're not familiar with the model, it describes how people have different needs that must be met at lower levels before they can satisfy the needs at the higher levels. At the foundation are things like food and water and safety. And then as you move up, we move up into things like belonging and esteem, where self-actualization is the top of the pyramid. So obviously right now, people are focused on the bottom of the pyramid. And if you think about what you're experiencing and what your teacher colleagues are experiencing and what your communities are experiencing, one thing that I think we need to recognize is that our marginalized communities are being hit the hardest. So then consider that our teachers are about to walk right into those challenges with tools that are unfamiliar to them, right? Like this webinar, Zoom, Google Hangouts, and the rest of the technology that they have to use. Then you also need to recognize that with all of that, we need data to do things differently for people. So rather than using data as a hammer, and I'm not suggesting that I ever meant to use data as a hammer, but I think sometimes the principals that I worked with and the superintendents and the teachers might have felt that way. Right now, more than ever, we need to use information that we have at our fingertips to ask other kinds of questions, like how many students participated in school last week and which students didn't, and to be able to give a list of those students and their names to the teachers and the principals. Which teachers have the technology they need, and which teachers have been trained to use Zoom, and how many students have a functional computer at home, and which students are being distracted so much at home that they can't focus on school. And I want to pause and make sure I'm really clear on this next point. Often as researchers, we do a study, we collect the data and report on it, and we think we're finished. I think now is an important time for us all to realize that we might need to do that same survey or that same study again and again and again. Because maybe a teacher who had technology or a student who was engaged in September is no longer experiencing that in October or November. So we all need to be patient and avoid judgment, and we need to help our educators and our colleagues in whole new ways. Who Knew It's data warehouse and analytics tool is a great tool for running a school year like this because of all the different kinds of data that are available. And you might already have metrics that are built that answer these kinds of questions. And if you don't, good news, you can contact Who Knew It and you can design a new one and they will launch it for you. When I first got into this business many years ago, I had just finished my doctorate and people were telling me that I needed to figure out how to communicate these complex data and reports in simple, plain English. In other words, just because those of us on this call, we work with large data sets and we do complex analysis and calculations, when we produce a report or prepare data for others, they shouldn't need a master's or a doctorate degree to understand what we're saying. So now's a great time to share your skills and knowledge. Now is a great time to help people in your district that you might not have worked with before, because no matter what their role is, they need data in order to do their jobs well. So it's a great time to reboot. It's a great time to show people that data is not a hammer, that they don't need to be afraid of data, and that we can help them survive and thrive in 2020. Thanks for letting me share a few of my thoughts.
Thanks, Joel. Really appreciate it. All right. I'm now going to pass the presentation over to Courtney, who's going to lead our discussion today.
So I'm super excited to jump in. So I got to stop myself for a minute here and go back and just, I want to just remind everybody, we're ecstatic again that Jennifer and Heather and Joel are joining us today. As you see, they bring some very different backgrounds and some different roles and a variety of experience. We do desperately want you to engage today. Use the chat function. Please ask questions, whether it's to a specific person or just in general or things that we want to talk about. We've got some questions to kind of get us started, but we're really hoping that the community drives the direction and the areas that you want to listen to the expertise in the room talk about today. So again, please use that Q&A functionality, that chat function. We're going to be monitoring that. If it's something that we think we can slip in very easily, we're just going to kind of ebb and flow the direction again in the questions based on kind of areas of interest. I've got enough to fill like 3 hours worth of stuff. So we're good to go, but please again help shape to make sure that this hour meets your needs today. So definitely kind of coming back to this idea, and Joel, you mentioned it, and Jennifer, you focused on it as well, this idea about growth and moving students forward and how in the new kind of normal are we going to look to use data to help figure out where our kids are at and what our targets need to look like, our expectations for teaching and learning moving forward. So I know you guys have done some work, all of you, with kind of school improvement planning. Talk to me a little bit about, what are you hearing from your districts or your schools about kind of their planning process for bringing kids back, and this idea about how are we going to figure out where they're at as they walk through the door?
I'm happy to jump in. We had the 47 school districts here in California. I was sharing with our team earlier that the governor in California has kind of set the stage for us. So he's decided certain criteria for counties that are with COVID results. And if you fit this specific criteria, you may not have students on campus. And so our districts were planning to bring students back. Unfortunately, we were put on the list last week. So everyone in Kern County will be distance learning full time. So you can imagine a little bit of panic on everybody at this point. But before that, I collected some data last night to share with you. So I had about 20 districts that have published what they had planned to do. And so I would say the majority of ours here in Kern County, we're looking at a mixed, coming back mixed. So we had some that were looking at 4 days a week, kids would come, like half days, and then on Friday they would be home. We had some that were 2 days a week with a group A, so they had half the kids, and then group B would come the other 2 days. We had some that were coming, group A was in the morning and group B was in the afternoon with enough time in between to do some deep cleaning. Most of our districts are looking at least 1 day a week, with the idea of giving teachers a lot of prep time to prep for those online activities, along with wanting to do small groups. So after they're teaching in some capacity, to be able to have a couple of hours where they can either Zoom in with a couple of kids that they're seeing that are struggling with areas, to be able to do those small group instructions. A lot of our districts, so that's about 8 of our districts that I was able to collect data on, with that kind of that mixed half home, half here. Our superintendents got together at the beginning of this, and all 47, and came up with a survey. And it was really detailed. As a parent of kids here in Kern County, I was able to take it as a mom as well. And really looking at, they asked, what do you want? Do you want your kid to come back full time? Do you feel comfortable with that? If they did come back, what are some qualifying factors that you would want to be in play if that were to happen? Or do you plan on not sending them back at all? And would you like us, what kind of offering? So from those, so that huge deep qualitative data, right, from parents. Do you want them to be bused? Do you not want them to be bused? So they were really, do you want daycare? Do you not want daycare? So schools were really able to take that data. And so about half of them determined to do kind of options. So parents were given the option of saying, okay, after we got the feedback from you, it looks like half of our parents want their kids at home full time and half want them in seats. And so they've designed online learning. I think they've taken some of their classroom teachers and decided they're going to be the online group for kids that have decided that the parents want them to stay home. And then some are determining who's going to be coming back to site. So definitely giving some parent choice in how they're going to be coming back. And it was based on the data specific to their district and what their families want. So I know we're talking about sharing different assessment strategies. And I think they've really landed on the older kids being able to use a lot of technology to be able to determine where kids are at, a lot of our star reading and star math, those kinds of things. I know our littles, our K through 2, are really talking about what can they have parents sit side by side and maybe do some assessments over Zoom to be able to gather where the kids are at, and which ones of those would be appropriate to do over Zoom. So kind of a mixed gathering of being able to gather that data, mixed tools. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I know there's a big kind of struggle just trying to figure out, you know, with that teacher time and that PD component that I think districts that are doing blended are trying to build in. You know, what are we asking them to do? What kind of tools are we giving them? So I know Jennifer's eager to jump in.
So we were under a county order to go full remote until the end of September. And yesterday at 3 o'clock, that order changed. And now the order expired. And so schools are starting on August the 19th. So as you can imagine, I feel like this whole spring and summer has been a ping pong, just how fast can you flip it? And so one of the things we've done very frequently throughout the summer is surveying parents and teachers. For parents, giving them a choice. So we're going to offer 3 learning options. We're going to have an in-person option, we're going to have a remote option, and we're going to have a hybrid option. So the hybrid option allows for part remote, part instruction, dependent upon courses that are difficult to teach online, such as CTE courses, athletics, fine arts. One of the things that we've also done, we know from our data in the spring that access was an issue we had to deal with. We have students who are homeless and they don't have a device or Wi-Fi. And so we have really been amping up our purchasing of devices and Wi-Fi. One of the things that we are implementing that's going to start is through our learning management system, our technology has created a virtual backpack, and it's aligning with our student information system. And so when kids log in, they'll see a virtual backpack for each one of their classes. And teachers will connect Google Classroom or Canvas or Seesaw or whatever they're using. And based upon that virtual backpack, we are going to be able to run engagement data. So we're going to be able to look at how often kids are engaging, how long are they in the platform. And we're hoping to incorporate that into our Who Knew It dashboards, so that's evident that we can look at what does our economic disadvantage engagement rate look like. And so we're putting processes in place for teachers to be contacting those students when that engagement is not there. One of the things we've also done is we've determined for students, we are anticipating about 30% of our students will go remote. We are doing a parent survey right now, and they are selecting their choice. And our state has mandated that parents will get to re-choose their instructional choice every grading period. So for us, that's every 9 weeks, parents will get to reselect their learning method. And so we have dedicated a full professional development week of what a remote teacher looks like, how to take our units of study for language arts and how to switch that into a remote setting. And so we have about 1,500 teachers who are going through online courses on their own right now. And we will be doing a heavy push for our second week in August through professional development.
Hello. So the districts that I'm working with, I think, are making some similar choices about how to organize students and adults. I think that obviously it's been the big challenge for the last few months when the pandemic first hit. And then this summer, I think a lot of districts are experiencing what Jennifer and Heather talked about, which is they plan for one method and then their county or state shifts them and they have to shift. And I think that that's something we have to be ready for the rest of the school year. We're about to launch a school year where my kids go to school with distance learning, and that may change in 6 months. Another district I'm working with, which has a very low rate of COVID right now, they're planning to open up most of their schools in regular fashion, but if the COVID rates increase, then they might have to shift again. And I think that creates a lot of challenges for the teachers and the students and the families. And for me, I think the important question, what's written here on the slide, is what will learning look like? I'm not sure what learning will look like. As educators, we're spending a lot of time trying to organize kids and adults, and the actual learning really concerns me. When I reviewed surveys from the previous distance learning that we did in the spring, I saw a lot of challenges for kids and adults. The teachers experienced a lot of difficulties with the technology. They found it hard to connect with some students without having them in their same physical space. And then the students experienced everything from lack of motivation to technology issues to feeling overwhelmed. And when we're experiencing these Zoom calls on a daily basis as professionals, when our kids are going to be doing that, it's going to be easy for the most vulnerable students to really check out. So I think for me, what I'm most concerned about with what learning looks like is how we're going to help the students who are low income and English learners and foster students when they don't have that face-to-face daily interaction with teachers and counselors and other important adults in their lives. I'm really concerned that the learning, and especially the learning gap that we all know about, is going to grow this year. So I'm hoping very much that our professionals, our teachers, and principals and others will work collaboratively to really focus mostly on student learning above everything else, and student wellness and support for students.
Yeah, most definitely. I appreciate you honing in on that as well. I know that's an area we definitely kind of want to talk through today. And I think what Jennifer said really resonated as well around that idea about looking at engagement data. Similar, Joel, to what you mentioned earlier, some of the traditional things we assessment and, our benchmarking success year over year just don't make sense. Even if we had the data, things aren't aligning anymore in that way. And so what other kinds of ways are we going to use data? As you mentioned earlier, not really as a hammer, more as, that sense of, where are kids truly at and where are teachers at, in this process, so that we can support, as the upper level adults in the organization, we get the privilege of supporting kids and other adults in the system, right? To be able to help both groups move forward to ensure everybody gets their needs met. And in looking at doing some of that work. So Jennifer, I know you had mentioned kind of looking at that engagement data and working with teachers around, you know, reaching out and trying to get that sense. And Joel, you had mentioned, you know, kind of, you didn't use these words, but what I took was that continuity of learning concern, right? So as we may flip back and forth between hybrid and then online, and then now we're back and now we're not back, and now numbers are up, and now, you know, and like head spinning, what are we doing today? You know, I'd love just to kind of hear thoughts about, you know, how at the adult level and at the kid level are we thinking learning and continuity, and you know, is that even something anybody's far enough down the line of thinking to have really kind of, like you said, Jennifer, put together PD around or kind of done some long-term planning?
So I know in Keller, we are not asking teachers to do both. So we are designating in-person teachers, and we will have full-time remote. Now we do know we are expecting that an in-person classroom teacher, they may have an outbreak and have to flip for 2 weeks. And so part of our professional development is getting teachers, like when kids come on those first weeks of school, let's practice Zoom. Let's practice being in Google Classroom. Let's practice these things so that we're prepared when this closure happens. But we were very intentional when starting this conversation with planning for next year that we weren't going to ask teachers to be a face-to-face and have remote students going at the same time. So that allows us to really focus our professional development on, if you're an in-person teacher, what does student collaboration look like? Because they're going to have to be 6 feet apart. So instead of that turn and talk or different instructional strategies, how can we do that with that social distance in place? So when our in-person teachers are going through their professional development, we will be giving them instructional strategies on how to, you know, how it looked before COVID, how it looks in a social distance world, and how it might look if you have to flip it online. So I'll say those are our what we're really honing in on right now.
So I think you're going to get a lot of people that want to come to Keller and go through your PD, having figured out, you know, what some of those things look like, and feel like, just my own TMI moment here. My husband has all of his, is a high school principal, and he has all of his teachers back starting this morning. And similarly, you know, they didn't have enough teachers willing to come back in person. So even though some of the models had people coming back, they had to readjust some things based on staff willingness as well. And so, but similarly, they're doing a ton of technology-based strategies of how, you know, how to use this tool, just to try specifically for those collaboration pieces. So whether in the classroom or whether they're at home, how do you look at engaging kids when you can't really engage kids in the ways that we're traditionally used to? So I appreciated that. I'm gonna detour myself for half a second and just kind of take a look at the Q&A pieces. I think there are some questions that have come up. I know, Jennifer, if you don't mind, while I zip through this, a couple of people have asked, they really want to know more about kind of this digital backpack idea. They're struggling to do kind of exactly, I think, what you shared, which is really simplify things for parents and for kids, while still allowing adults to have some control over which tools they're comfortable with. Would you mind just sharing a little bit more?
So we use ClassLink and Clever, and we integrate those two tools together where there's a landing page for students and staff. And then we connect ClassLink and Clever. We have just transitioned to a new student information system. So just during all of this, that's a great time for that. So Aries is our new student information system. And so when so the partnership between those three tools, let me just talk about the back end for a minute. So on the back end, the teacher will have control of the student's backpack. So the teacher will go in and link in like Canvas or Google Classroom. They might link in, you know, I hate to say this, but an online textbook, if that's what they need to put in there, whatever resources. So that also allows for the single sign-on. So students aren't having, and parents aren't having to keep up with usernames and passwords. So that's been a huge 3-month development that is going to be in the training for our in-person teachers and our remote teachers. So that, correlation between Aries, Clever, and ClassLink, that's how we are creating the digital backpack. What was I don't remember what else you were asking me to
You mentioned to Jennifer that you guys were hopefully using kind of the that process to look at engagement.
Yes.
Just a little bit. It sounds like you've got a vision. I think people are
Yes.
interested to hear.
So part of this digital backpack, a teacher will have they'll have a page within the digital backpack that shows the statistics for each kid. So it will show them for each student, like what their engagement, have they logged in that day? What have they spent, their time in? And we're going to take that data and I want to feed it into Who Knew It, so that people at a high level can see, if you're in charge of dyslexia, what does your students look like? And so teachers will see it on a small scale with their students. But what I'm wanting to do is take that data and put it into Who Knew It, so we can look at it in a dashboarding format and do the filtering based upon the lens that you need to look through.
Yeah, there's all, once we get it in there, there's all sorts of some of those
Yes.
cool correlations we can do. And I love the idea of having that data at the kid level as well, moving forward, especially as you flip back and forth, if kids are going back and forth, to really see if there's significant changes in engagement levels between different models and students in different groups. So I'll be excited to keep in touch and keep that going, so I can get questions answered myself.
Now, I just want to add this. One of the pieces of feedback we received from the spring is we had too many different platforms, like Google Classroom, Seesaw, Canvas. Some weren't using anything. And so we've really streamlined at these grade levels. This at K2 will be Seesaw, at grades 3 through 6 will be Google Classroom, and 7 through 12 will be Canvas. So we're hoping on the parent side, that's going to become easier. So they're not having to learn all these different systems. So that has been a big push, especially with our digital backpack.
Yeah, and that echoes what I've heard from most of the districts that we're working with, as we've asked, is everybody just said, use what your kids know. And if you don't, we'll teach you how to use something really fast, just again, for that continuity for the student. But definitely, I think most districts have said people felt really frazzled. Both of my students are in high school, so they were relatively independent in that process, and they had a good handle on it. But one of my son had 4 classes, and each classroom had a different platform, a different way they were supposed to get into it. So even as an educator that's comfortable with technology, I struggled being able to do that as well. So I know districts have really focused on that. I think that's going to pay off greatly, the work that districts are doing to try to streamline for parent engagement. Joel, one of the things you had mentioned earlier that is kind of popping up as a question, and I think we've circled around it a little bit, but as accountability people and assessment people, and even as teachers and educators and building principals, we have a pretty traditional way we look at measuring success, even if it's growth or pass rates, but we kind of have our rhythm of the things that we are used to, using to make decisions in kind of where we're at now. Do you have ideas or suggestions or things you've worked with in your consulting space around, just helping to kind of create that sense of buy-in, right? So like, here's the things that we have control over, and working with our educators and the people that we're leading inside of our systems to help them really find value in the data that they have access to now.
Sure, that's a great question. I think, and if you know me, this is, you might laugh a little bit, but I think it begins by listening. The most important thing we need to do is listen. As a researcher, I started out as a researcher, which means that I gather a lot of information and then want to share it. And in K-12 data, each of us have a tremendous amount of information at our fingertips, and we often think we know what it means, and we want to share it, whether that's with the superintendent or with the principal. I think some of the best tools and reports and solutions I've ever created started with me listening to a principal or me listening to a teacher. So you still have a ton of data at your fingertips, and even in this new world, whatever school is going to look like in your district, you have a lot of data. I think instead of trying to push the data out to people, maybe listen to what their needs are and pull out of them what's happening, what's important to them. What's happening and important might be something around student engagement. Again, listening to what their needs are, it might not be time to create a long, lengthy SurveyMonkey tool to gather, dissertation level data on student engagement in your district. Maybe all they need is a 3-question survey that they can use each day at the beginning of the day with their teachers to gather data. So I think rather than spending time with our data, we should probably spend time listening and talking to teachers and principals, probably principals more than teachers right now, so we don't overwhelm the teachers. But we could solve issues for them and problems for them, and probably give them more time to do the important work of talking to kids and adults by creating solutions for them. And we might even be creating solutions that aren't about data and reports. Maybe we have particular skills and we could help host Zoom calls for them. Maybe we can create other technical solutions because of the skills that we have as data leaders. So I think that the most important thing though is to listen to people and find out what their needs are, and then help them get the data to answer those questions.
Thank you for that. Yeah, important reminder. As concerned as we are about meeting the needs of teachers, it's that same anxiety they're feeling about transitioning down to meet the needs of kids. And so remembering that, I think, is an important piece, that we're all flinging it together, kind of on a day-by-day basis, trying to do the best we can, in our journey. So one of the things that has come up, and I know we are, again, kind of focused on data and that kind of learning culture. Talk a little bit about thoughts around how are we going to measure learning loss? Like what are we thinking about doing to figure out, if we're worrying about enlarging gaps of, at-risk students, just our general ed kids that show up and struggle and don't struggle. What strategies or thoughts are you hearing or putting in place to just get a sense of where kids are at when they walk in the door for you, whenever that ends up being, or when they jump online with you, whatever walking through the door looks like?
I know some of our districts here in Kern have talked about being able to bring kids back and starting with those groups first. So looking at our special needs students and making sure we have time and space to bring them back first if we have the opportunity to do so. Those of our English learners as well, and just providing instruction over and above. We've given access to all of our special education. Most of our districts are using Canvas as their learning management system, and so giving special education teachers access to the general curriculum so they can help support and modify behind the scenes there as well. So we've also talked about our socioeconomically disadvantaged students and making sure that they are top of the list to come back, knowing that face-to-face instruction is going to be what they need to help close those gaps.
So in Keller, we are an NWEA district. We administer MAP. And so for students who will be coming back in person, that is something that, we will obviously not right off the bat, but after, our push is really on social and emotional, because we know those needs are going to be there. So at the beginning of September, we're going to begin the administration of MAP reading and math and science. For our virtual students, our remote students, we have worked with NWEA for virtual proctoring. So one of the things is during our training PD, we will be working with remote teachers on how to remotely administer that assessment to students. Because it's really not about, we know kids are going to be behind, but we need to know where are they right now. And so we are going to be working with our teachers now that you have this data. What is that going to look like in the virtual environment and in the face-to-face environment? And so we did a pilot with NWEA a couple of years ago, and now we're full. We give it to all K through 8th grade. And so for our K through 8, that is the data that we are going to be using to help drive our instruction.
Yeah, I know people were kind of hit or miss in the spring. There was a couple of districts that did remote for whatever their assessment tool, whether it was Renaissance, whether it was Dibbles, whether it was, or actually I don't know that anybody, it's not Dibbles anymore. I got to change my, but I know there were some groups that did, but many didn't. So I know a lot of our districts are dealing with, they have fall and winter from whatever their benchmark assessments are. And then like this giant gap of nothingness, you know, between January, February, and as kids are walking in the door this fall. So, so it's good to know people are kind of thinking about, we're going to need this, whether it's remote or not remote. We've got to have some kind of data around standards and understanding in order to shape instruction. Is there anybody else using, or Joel, have you heard of anybody else that's not looking to do benchmark assessments at all, or has some other strategy, or that's requiring kids to come in order to do assessment? I know that was a real concern for some districts in the spring.
No, I think that
data.
many districts don't have a benchmark assessment system in place already. You know, Jennifer talked about that they have NWEA, and having, whether it's NWEA or iReady or some other tool at your fingertips that you can use, I think is critical. A lot of districts, I think, will probably end up just letting teachers administer their own assessments to answer those questions, which may be fine, because the most important question is, what are the kids ready to learn, and where do the teachers need to teach? And that might not need to be aggregated up in a comprehensive way at the district level at this time. But I think teachers, I think the burden is going to really fall on teachers for the most part to answer that question of student learning loss.
Yeah, I've definitely heard some strong conversation around PLC models kind of being reinvigorated, you know, around looking at common formatives and really kind of creating some things to drive instruction that are much more focused on, you know, whatever curriculum set and standard order, you know, district to district is working, again, just because of that kind of lack of some of those things that may be aligned, or lack of access to tools, and with budgets being a little crazy in some places too, some concerns about, you know, jumping into, you know, something like a full-blown assessment tool at this point in time as well. So. Okay, I've got a couple more things popping up on chat, please. Again, I'd love to have you get questions up there so we can make sure that we get your needs met today. So Jennifer, I know you mentioned professional development. You guys seem to have a pretty thoughtful plan in terms of kind of where you're focused. What do you, have you guys thought through past the start of the school year? So I know you've got some things set up around getting people comfortable with the mode of instruction and how it's connected. Do you have some things in place around, you know, what kind of data you know, you mentioned MAP, but do you have a structure kind of going in place, or some PD to really help teachers continue to kind of understand where their kids are at as the school year progresses?
So kind of, I'll touch on two things. On the PD, we asked teachers, what do you need to shift to remote? And so how that whole structure was developed was based upon teacher feedback. They said things like, I need to know more how to use the Zoom tools. I want to be trained in Nearpod. I want more training on Google Classroom. I want to know how I can administer formative assessments online. And so really the whole structure was built upon teacher feedback. Because I know at the district level, we can think one thing, but we're not in the classroom. And so we really used our teachers' voice in determining what kind of training they would need. And you know, I know this is probably not the right answer, but we're taking it in small chunks because we don't know what November is going to look like. And so we are, and I don't know if this is a right or wrong answer, but we're just taking it in small chunks. So we do have, with NWEA, one of the things that our teachers said when we piloted this was we need PLCs focused on how to read the data and how do we revise instruction to meet the needs of where students are. So one of the things that we did is we hired NWEA consultants to come in and help conduct PLCs with teachers so that teachers could get a good understanding of what the data says and what do we do with it. And so one of the things that we've done is we've used some of our funds to do that again, but in a virtual setting. So we are going to have PLCs with NWEA at each of our campuses, working with our grade level teams on what does your data say and what do we need to do with that. So that's just kind of a very broad, I will say it's expensive to do it, but our teachers felt like that was the best support that they had in looking at, you know, what do we do now? And so that is one of the things that we will be doing in this unique school year. So.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yep, I was going to say, I know Heather's got, this is her jam right here. So I want to make sure we get a chance for her to share.
I actually would love to share a document with you. You know, our role as the county office is not to tell districts what to do, is really just to help their thinking. And so we created this document that is being shared now. And so this front page, you'll see there's tabs on the bottom. You guys are welcome to have this and make a copy. But we were thinking about those as you're planning for the next couple of years, the next years specifically, what are those big buckets of work that you need to really dive deeply into? So you can see here we've got assessing current status, systems and structures, curriculum and instruction, the social emotional piece that we all need to address as well as our students come back, professional learning, parent and student support as they navigate this new world, and then communication. And so we just thought about some beginning questions to get their brains going to make sure that they've thought about this in its entirety. And then, so then I wanted to share with you, if you go to that, so you see that first tab there is all in purple around assessing current status. But if you go to the first tab, it takes those questions and then breaks them down. And we've given this to each district. So they get to answer these in 3 different scenarios. So what would it look like? I'm going to take question number 2. What data might we analyze to inform our teaching and learning plan? So the first box you'll see there is in all face-to-face instruction. And so they can go into that tab and add their answers there. The third tab you'll see there is in a blended learning environment. What data do they need in that environment? And then the final one you'll see there is all distance. And then under each of their responses, we ask them who is responsible for implementing that action. When is the target completion date for that action? Who is going to be monitoring the implementation of that action? And how are they going to measure the success? As well as when are those monitoring dates? So we are currently meeting for 3 days with our superintendents that have given them this plan. We have a team of them together kind of going through this. And we're hoping that over the 3 days, they really feel prepared to navigate going back and forth from blending to possibly in seats to possibly going back to full distance learning. And so as you can see, that tab is there. And there's a tab for each of those areas to kind of think through. So professional development is one of those tabs that we have in there as you start to think through that. Yeah, there you go. How you're going to train and support your families and such. And you'll notice that each of the categories we end around equity, going back to what we said earlier. So what equity considerations do we need to think about? Not just for our students, but for our teachers as we start to prepare this plan going forward. So that's what we're utilizing just to kind of get brains going and hoping to, there's just so much on administrators' plates to think about that we thought, let's step back and think about what are those priority areas. We've also are really trying to push with our districts that even though we could go back to face-to-face, this is an opportunity to really rethink learning. And that if you are face-to-face, we call it butts in seats, right? We still need to have some kind of component of distant learning. We can't go backwards. Like, let's use this as an opportunity to really engage technology within our classrooms. And so we're hoping some of these questions, even though they're face-to-face, to be thinking about how are we going to, if we get to go back face-to-face at some point, how are you going to make sure that this boom in technology stays within your system for your kids? So those are the 3 scenarios we ask them to plan for. You can imagine they're all like focused on all distance at the moment, but are hoping that they'll get all of that planned out. So I want to share that. You guys are welcome to steal it and change it and make it whatever works for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather. So we will definitely grab this from Heather and give you a version that's not connected back to their version and make that available for you as a resource. We super appreciate that. I know that the Kern County office has done incredible work to support their districts, both with creating online curriculum and launching the LMS. And so giving them this support too really creates a nice trifecta.
People are asking, and I just want to know if you're from California and your accountability at all, we all know we have the LCAP that's due, it's a new LCAP that's due in September. All of the questions that are in the LCAP that's due this September are embedded within this plan that we made. So if your district goes through and fills this out in its entirety, you should be able to fill out the LCAP that's due to the state at the end of September. So we tried to blend those together. So if I see some people asking for it. So if you're from California, it really is a good planning tool to make sure that you cover that state report that's due the end of September.
I will tell you, working in multiple states, a lot of the LCAP pieces are the same things that you're going to find in your Title I plans and the other plans that you have to submit regardless of where you are. So there's probably some strong value even outside of California. So I know we kind of are pushing some timelines out a little bit here. So I want to go ahead and create space for Sarah or Andrea to jump in and
Hey y'all, I just wanted to, I think we still have a little bit more time. I think we're on till 10:30 Pacific time.
Okay.
Yep. So, but in light of that, one of the questions that I had for you all, and just looking at the Q&A piece, is there was a question about the administration of surveys. And I'm curious from our panelists how you're using those surveys, and what your plan is for the year. So specifically, how frequently do you plan on administering them? How are you planning on using the results? To whom do you plan on surveying? And maybe like how you plan on reporting that information.
So I'll tell you, we have a lesson learned. We started off with Google surveys, and we were asking specific questions that, like we wanted to know a student's grade level and the campus, and parents were selecting things that were inaccurate. So we've moved to something called Laserfish that connects to our student information system so that data is already pre-populated so that parents don't have to think about what school their child's going to go to or what grade they're in. And so we've started to do surveys about every 3 to 4 weeks, and we're surveying parents, we're surveying students, and then we're surveying teachers. And so like one of the things that we are about to push out today is we're going to ask our teachers, do we need to push the first day of school? Like, do we need to change that date a couple of days to give you more time in planning? And so we shared those results. Our superintendent does a Facebook Live, and so we share those results and that avenue on our website through the board, but that's really helping us drive some of the decisions that we're making.
I wanted to echo what Jennifer said. I think it's really critical to be smart about surveys and not just throw, throw your rod into the water and try to catch a fish. One of the districts I worked with was doing surveys about parents' choices for distance learning or in-person learning. And when you send out a Google survey or a SurveyMonkey survey without that connection back to your student information system, then parents might be selecting schools that their kids don't even go to, which is what happens, or the wrong grade levels, or all sorts of things that create just total havoc for each of us that work with the data. So most student information systems have an ability to send a survey out from the SIS, or you can use a third-party product like Jennifer mentioned. But I would, the districts I'm working with, I recommend that they do short surveys with just a couple of questions, because people are going to be surveyed out very soon. Over the summer, we saw some of that when there were shifts with our county and state, and we were sending surveys out about parent choice, and then the state said, well, you don't really have a choice. As Heather mentioned, we're going to tell you whether you're opening or not. So I like Jennifer's suggestion of doing surveys staggered out throughout the year, and I would recommend keeping them short and keeping them really focused on student and teacher experiences. And then finally, I think one of the questions is, what do you do with the data and where do you report it? I think sometimes with data, we're afraid to share it. I think in this case, it's probably important to get it to these district leaders as quickly as possible, and then also to the teachers. We don't always give the survey data right back to the teachers, but if possible, if you can give the real data about their students right back to the teachers, and not try to do a research study that that protects the anonymity of each individual student. I think in this case, your teachers need to know if a student is struggling emotionally. So I think the reporting back to teachers and the classrooms and the principals as quickly as possible is important.
I know that some of our districts are doing kind of a button or what have you for parents and teachers and students that just says like, how are things going? And it's a generic Google sheet that so when I'm ready and I'm frustrated, you're going to be able to hear from me, not when it's convenient to send out the survey, but when I'm upset. So really trying to make sure that people have accessibility to be able to say this, both kids, right? To like a socially, emotionally, I'm struggling here. So kind of a wraparound services survey for them to be able to say, I'm frustrated with the technology. I'm frustrated with my teacher. I'm frustrated with, social emotional. I'm not getting the help that I need at home, those kinds of things. So I think a lot of our districts are trying to just make them open surveys so that people can provide feedback when needed.
I know we've got some districts as well that as part of their kind of kids about to start their lesson for the day, their opening assignment is a quick, how do I feel? Am I ready to learn today? Do I have my stuff? Just to kind of set that stage. And so that as teachers are engaging with kids, they've got kind of some, hey, when a student did this today, here's how they started, and then here's how they ended. So they were kind of benchmarking, how did I feel when I started? And then where am I at the end, to really kind of capture that, to put whatever learning or assignment completion or assessment, whatever they did kind of in context, to just connect those data elements back together.
I just wanted to share this. We had a teacher who did this in the spring, and she had her students create Bitmojis at different parts of the day, and kids loved it. And so I thought that was something I didn't even think of, but the kids loved creating their Bitmoji on how they were feeling, and that really allowed for that really individualized from the student back to the teacher. So just want to share that.
Great. Hey, I wanted to follow up with one additional question around student equity. And you think about this moment in time. This could be a time when we're seeing gaps potentially grow, which is a scary thing. So when we think about student equity, I'm curious how you're addressing or how you're thinking about what you're doing through an equity lens, whether that be through access, maybe access to devices, whether that be through student engagement or student learning outcomes or parent engagement or family engagement. Just want to hear your general thought on equity as a theme, and especially student equity.
I think for us, the Who Knew It platform has been great to be able to use the mapping piece. We were able to kind of figure out where our socioeconomically disadvantaged students were in high populations. We put our buses and made them Wi-Fi, remote Wi-Fis. And so we concentrated those buses in areas where we had high populations of socioeconomically disadvantaged students, able to see which apartment complexes, those kinds of things. And so able to put the buses there at certain times and let them know they could come sit outside of the bus and be able to access their schoolwork. So really the heat map that's there has really been helpful for us to be able to tag where are our foster youth students, where, you know, where, how can we better serve? And we actually did our hot lunches that way as well, figuring out where those stations are that we could do publicly, where are we going to get the most students. So that map has been really helpful in targeting those students that we know need extra support.
I love that, Heather. And just as a reminder, those maps, your filters work with. So if you wanted to jump in and grab your most recent assessment scores in a certain area, or students that were struggling with attendance, or any of those different data elements, you could always student group those kids together and use them as a filter in any of the maps inside of the basic essentials package to see, again, concentration of a variety of data elements for kids as you are looking at kind of thinking about popping community resources out to target students in need.
I was going to add, one of the districts that I'm working with is doing something I thought was really innovative and exciting. They're putting most of their resources into distance learning. They're allowing their teachers to teach from home or to come to the classrooms and teach. Many teachers are going to be in their regular classrooms teaching, so they're going to have staff on campus, and they took that further, and they are going to be bringing their students with special education needs onto campus and just keeping them distanced in classrooms with 3 to 4 to 5 kids per classroom. So they're using their staff in creative ways, and they're using their facilities in order to give some of their most needy students the services they need, while the rest of the students can get what they need through that distance learning model, which is imperfect, but I think targeting extra resources to your most vulnerable students right now is a great idea.
Well, then I'll keep going with another question. I have a lot of questions. You have to bear with me here. What I'm curious about is, I assume almost all of you have had some experience back in the spring of doing some type of remote learning or distance learning. And now you're fast forward and we're about ready to open schools again. Curious in that process if you had or you'd like to illuminate any lessons learned, like what might you be doing differently as a result? And I know you've talked about some of those things already. But think about that in terms of what might you do differently, and specifically, and/or what piece of advice might you give anyone on this call? 85% of the people on this call are district leaders, and/or affiliated with an organization leading children. And this is a key time. What piece of advice might you have for them based on what you've learned to date?
I'll say one of the things, and this kind of speaks out with equity, we saw our lowest engagement at our title campuses, which, you know, would make sense. And so what we are doing right now is we are using money that we've received from the state because there might be 6 kids in a household and only 1 device in the house. And so we've really put our money towards, we weren't a one-to-one district, but we need students to have their own device. And then kids in our, who are economically disadvantaged or attend a title campus, we need to provide them with a MiFi because our engagement at our title campuses was not good in the spring. And so we've really been focused on that.
For us, our theme has been grace and space. So give everybody grace. This is a whole new world for us, and some space to just kind of learn. Big takeaway has been it's difficult to manage all of these systems. And as leaders, I really feel like it's important that we are on the forefront and being vulnerable. And so we're asking our administrators here at the county office to get into Canvas and create a class. Figure out how you link things. Your teachers need to know that, but you need to be uncomfortable as well. Right now we're currently doing a webinar with over 500 people, and it was super nerve-wracking for us at the county office because you wanted everything to be so professional, and we weren't. Like, we messed some things up yesterday, and we even said, you know what, this is what it feels like to be a teacher. Things are not going to go well, and if we're not showing that we're willing to be vulnerable, how do we expect our teachers to do the same thing? So we've got to be learners alongside with our teachers, and kind of moving forward. So that's been our big aha, was getting in the weeds and really helping provide grace and space and be a good example.
I think my advice would be listen to Jennifer and Heather. That was some really good advice. I think I like the way that Heather just said grace and space. There's such a need by so many of us to get to the end, to accomplish something, that we need to remember that what's happening for people is traumatic in many ways. I think as a district leader, the most important thing that we need to do as well is to keep our eyes up, to be looking down the road. If we're just looking at the work ahead of us today or this week, and we're not planning for the future, and we're not thinking about what could come around the corner in December or February, then we're setting our teachers and our parents and our students up for future problems. So I think it behooves us as leaders to be looking up and looking down the road and planning for the future and keeping our eye on that, on the ball down the road there.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I think it's probably time to start closing the conversation out. What I wanted to do was introduce you to my team, which is the customer success team. And so you can see here we have a group of data consultants, and each one of them have been assigned to one of our customers. And so my ask of you is, if you heard anything today that piqued your interest or you have questions, feel free to reach out to Dave Moyer, Sabrina Youssef, James Riddlesberger, or Matt Reese. So you'll be assigned to one of those, or you'll be assigned to me as well. I have some customers as well. But really, like, we learned a lot of information today, but if there's some, like I said, anything that piques your interest, maybe you want to learn how to report some of these digital learning analytics, or, you know, maybe you have an interest around heat mapping as it relates to access to devices, or maybe it wasn't even talked about today, but it's emergent need, like health reporting. We're starting to hear more about immunizations and health events and all of that kind of thing. Feel free to reach out to our team, and we will connect you with the resources that you need and or help you solve the problems that you have. So that's my ask. And then the other thing I just want to say is I want to thank everybody. I want to thank our panelists for being on the call, and also want to thank everyone in the audience. As I said, I know most of you work for ed organizations right now. On a personal note, as a mom of a second grader who actually unplugged the modem shortly before this call, which freaked me out because my internet wasn't working. New world we're in. I just want to say thank you, because I know I had worked in a district for 10 years. I know what you're going through. This is not an easy time. You're literally having to plan every day. It's something new, a new curveball. I just want to say on a personal level, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate for what you're doing for kids like my second grader.
Great, thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their experiences with us. I hope everyone in the audience had some takeaways. I know there are a few folks that aren't currently using the Who Knew It platform that are on the call today. So definitely follow up if you want to dive deeper into any of the discussion that you heard today, and how you could bring that to your own district. So I just wanted to wrap up by sharing a couple of upcoming events. So we have kind of two streams of virtual events here at Who Knew It. We're trying to hold a discussion like this on a monthly basis around a variety of topics. I think queued up next is actually going through our Who Knew It roadmap. So we've done quite a bit of innovation around, you know, kind of some of these COVID-19 specific use cases. I think for those of you who joined us last month, probably got a sneak peek of our digital learning analytics. So we'll actually be going through all the great new things that are available now and what's going to be coming in the future. And then kind of the topic on deck is really around operations. So definitely feel free to share those with your clients. For those of you in the Who Knew It community, we do regular virtual user groups, which are more open discussion, not in a webinar format. So you can actually see all of those at whoknewit.com/events on our website, and everybody's welcome to join us. So I think we'll close out today. Look for a follow-up communication with today's recording if you want to rewatch or share with any of your colleagues. And then we'll be sure to share some of the resources out, including the link that Heather shared of the great plan for hopefully to help you this new school year. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.